So I hope it's recording, right? Yep. Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar, Decoding AI's Environmental Impact, Navigating the Path to Sustainability, hosted by the Association of College and Research Libraries, ACRL, Science and Technology Section, Scholarly Communication Committee. Hao Yong Lang and I, Claire Tran, are co-chairs of the committee. We have our committee members, as you can see from the slides, right? Rachel Bouchard, Marianne Brake, Steph Crowell, Britt Foster, Michael Goldis, Jonathan Granite, sorry about that, Ryan Otto, Sam Putnam, Rebecca Resinick Sealan, Holly Thompson, Kira Y. And a lot of them will be here to help out with this webinar today. Before I introduce our presenter, I would like to make a few general announcements. The Zoom settings should be all set up, but please keep your microphone muted. If you have questions, please use the chat box and send in your questions. Online code of conduct. The American Association is committed to an open, inclusive, and collaborative environment. ALA members do not tolerate harassment in any form. We are colleagues and we treat each other with respect. If you experience anything that you would like to report, please reach out to the co-chairs or the whole co-host, right, in a private message, and we will do our best to address it. Accessibility, you should be able to toggle the closed caption on and off using the CC icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Recording, yes, the webinars will be recorded and we will post it on the ACRL STS YouTube channel. Okay, next one is today, and we're so lucky, we have two presenters. They are Marissa Burkland and Dr. Heidi Blackburn. I start with Marissa. Marissa Burkland is the Science and Data Librarian at George Mason University Library. Dr. Heidi Blackburn is the Computing Librarian at George Mason University Libraries. Now I turn it over to the presenter for their presentation. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, I leave it to both of you. Thank you.
Alrighty, let me just share my screen. I believe that is open for y'all. Alrighty, welcome. Thank you all for coming. Me and Heidi will be presenting today on decoding AI's environmental impact, navigating the path to sustainability. This presentation came out of a AI Salon series at George Mason Libraries, which explores how AI impacts different fields and topics. I did one in April for Earth Month. That was a precursor for this presentation. Fun fact, this presentation name was also AI generated because I am not the best at presentation titles, but I am very excited to get into it. So let's start. All right, so this is just a quick agenda of what we'll be going over in the presentation, some in the news, headlines, how we measured the impact, environmental impact of AI, some areas of effects, the two sides of the AI discussion, information literacy and misinformation as it pertains to AI's environmental impact, some responses from around the world in different sectors to AI's environmental impact, and some final thoughts.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Heidi Blackburn. My pronouns are she, hers. I am the computing librarian, which means I'm the computer science and IT librarian at George Mason. So AI has been my life all day, every day since 2023. So the environmental impact of AI was not something that was at the forefront of most people's minds when generative AI tools like ChatGPT first launched in 2023. However, as you can see from these headlines, there is growing concern about the effects on climate change, energy use, and underrepresented groups affected by climate change. And we can anticipate additional longitudinal studies as we track environmental impact over time as the use of these tools increases in society and more studies are published. So how do we measure the environmental impact of AI? So in this case, we are talking about generative AI tools such as ChatGPT, Perplexity, Microsoft Copilot, and Google Gemini. And since these tools are a new technology with very few regulations, we don't know a lot at this point. However, we can use similar technology to estimate its impact using scientific reasoning. We can use known standards for things like energy consumption, carbon footprint reporting, and resource efficiency or energy efficiency metrics, and water usage effectiveness. So Marissa went to the March to End Fossil Fuels in September 2023 and took the picture you see there on the screen. It's a giant skull made of e-waste, like motherboards, and it has nuclear energy towers on top, and it is a really great symbol of the resources it takes to support data centers and Bitcoin mining. So data centers and Bitcoin mining operations are two existing technologies that are useful for estimating the environmental impact of generative AI. They have similar functions and similar equipment is used to support these sources as it is used for generative AI tools like ChatGPT, as you can see by some of the examples that we have there in the list. The building and maintaining of data centers are particularly a hot button issue for Northern Virginia, where Marissa and I both live and work, because companies like Amazon come in and buy acres and acres of farmland to support these tools. I encourage you to Google data centers and Virginia to find out more about this topic, because we could definitely spend multiple sessions talking about that alone, and we don't have time to expand on it here.
Alrighty, so if you guys could put in the chat, we're gonna do a little polling activity, brainstorming. What are some areas and resources affected by data centers for AI, Bitcoin mining, and others? So think of some of the stuff that we might have mentioned, some of the things that you might be able to think of or have heard in the news. Just put them in the chat, anything that you can think of, and then we'll be going over some of them. The water in the C&O River. Yes, very, very true. Yeah, so there's like so many. So energy consumption during heat waves, freshwater budget, noise pollution, mines for cobalt and gold, energy, a lot of really good ones so far. Water, light pollution, water and energy consumption, energy, electricity. Awesome. Yes, still primarily produced by fossil fuels. See if we can get any more. Alrighty. Yeah, so as you can see, a lot of people already covered some of the big ones. These are just a few areas of effect. Some people mentioned clean water and electricity use. Somebody mentioned resource extraction, heat, land use. These are just a few notable areas and resources affected by data centers and AI. This is obviously not all of them, because there are quite a few direct and indirect environmental impacts, but we will be going more in depth for a few of them. So this is just a good overview of things to consider when looking not only at data centers, but technology in general. So Electricity use is the big one that most of you guys mentioned. It is the major environmental impact everyone's always talking about. So electricity can usually directly be translated to a carbon footprint as it is usually either generated by burning fossil fuels such as coal or gas, or with renewables such as wind or water. So think of all of the times that you might turn off, or think of all the things that you might turn off to save electricity and energy, such as your AC, your computer, your lights. That was a big thing in the 2000s, turn off your lights to conserve energy, put your AC on power saving mode. So think of something just like your AC, considering we're in a heat wave and I have my AC on. Think about leaving it on 24/7 if you just left it running all of the time. That would use a lot of energy. Now, imagine a couple 100,000 or million of them running 24/7. That is what a data center does. So the facilities that house servers are constantly running, doing computations, transfer protocols, etc. They are made up of these little towers, well, they're not little, made up of these towers that you can see on this graph, and there's just rows and rows, a whole entire warehouse full of them. So far more than anything that your laptop or my laptop can do. So with this massive energy increase in electricity needs and usage, where are we going to get all this electricity? So let's say a community is about to retire a coal plant because they built a wind farm that meets all of their electricity needs. With the sudden increase of data center usage and electricity, we suddenly need more electricity than we ever thought we would. So some places are keeping retirable fossil fuel plants online due to these increased energy needs. And as you can see by this graph, which is from the International Energy Agency, data centers are using quite a lot of energy. This is from 2020. They are using more energy than South Africa, Egypt, Argentina, Colombia, a little less than Indonesia and the UK, but not much. So there's just massive amounts of electricity that we are using here. Another one that a lot of people mentioned is clean water. So if anybody hasn't noticed, we are in a bit of a water crisis right now. Our planet of mostly water is only about 1.2% of that water is drinking water. There's also serious droughts in the US West Coast and drought conditions in the rest of the US. If you guys like to make campfires, you might have heard about the burn bans going on basically the entire summer. And usually these droughts are the cause of the horrific forest fires that we're seeing on the West Coast all the time. Since data centers are running all the time, 24/7, they need external sources to make sure that they don't overheat. In your computer, this may be a fan. My fan is currently very loud. I don't know why, probably because I have like 50 tabs open. But in data centers, it's usually water. Not only water, but usually clean, drinkable water so that the cooling mechanisms don't get all gunked up. They're usually choosing places to build these data centers that are already under drought conditions, like Nevada or Mexico. Thus, data centers are competing for water over areas like agriculture and municipal drinking water. So, you know, the water that we just turn on our faucet, wash our hands with, drink from, shower with, any of that stuff, we are competing technically with data centers for that. They also are draining our precious aquifers, which are the resources like caves of water underneath land, which have been replenishing less and less every year with the lack of rain and snow. A little anecdote, yesterday when I was on the shuttle to work, the DC NPR announced that Northern Virginia, which has the largest amount of data centers in the country, was being asked to conserve water because of drought conditions, which of course made me very mad as an environmentalist. And I messaged Heidi about that, and she was like, you have to include that in our presentation. And I was like, oh, this is so sad. But great story for this. Another thing that we like to consider is land use. If you live in an urbanized area like the DC area, you'll probably know about land use. So let's say the city tore down a police station to make way for luxury apartments, as is happening near my friend's house right now, or a school to make way for a police station. If you live in the suburbs or rural areas, you might see companies clearing beautiful forests for developments or taking down farms. This is a hot topic in Northern Virginia right now because lots of real estate is being taken up by data centers. There is a lot of people wanting to live in the area just because DC is a very robust and popular metro center, and we do not have enough housing, and a lot of this is being taken up by data centers. We're also clear-cutting forests out near Manassas, which I see when I drive to work sometimes, a lot of things like that. So another thing to consider is what could the land be used for? So could we use it for affordable housing so that more people could live in the DC area? Could we use it for a school to make sure that our kids are getting good educations, a hospital so that people in rural areas have access to healthcare, a place for wildlife to flourish, that they don't get displaced? Another thing about Northern Virginia is we have a very rampant deer population because they just don't have habitats to live in anymore, and they just go into people's backyards and eat their hostas and vegetables. I'm also on an urban agriculture board, and it's like a hot topic. But one case that I will actually mention later as well, in the Netherlands, farmers are currently fighting with Microsoft over land which they could be used for farming. They are currently building a third giant data center on fertile and farmable land, and the political party of farmers, which apparently has a lot of say in the Netherlands, is currently fighting back against it.
Okay, so there are always two sides to a coin. And I am going to talk about the arguments for AI, and there's current speculation as to how AI might help mitigate environmental impact despite its obvious contribution to the problem in its current state. I do not endorse these examples. These are just examples that are in the literature and in the news right now. So I'm going to argue, quote unquote, in favor of AI and share some current examples of how AI might help humans. So generative AI can analyze data to identify inefficiencies and suggest improvements in energy, water, and material consumption across industries. AI models can process and just huge amounts of climate change data in order to create more accurate predictions and simulations, aiding in climate change mitigation strategies. AI can generate innovative designs for products and packaging that minimize waste and environmental impact throughout their life cycle. Generative AI can optimize the placement and operation of renewable energy infrastructure like solar panels and wind turbines and where we should put them. And AI can supposedly speed up research in fields like materials sciences to potentially lead to breakthroughs in sustainable technologies and practices. So again, not things that I am personally endorsing, but it's good to see both sides of the discussion. So now I'm going to turn it over to Marissa, who is going to argue against the use of AI for environmental impact reasons.
Woo. While this presentation has mostly been about arguments against AI and its environmental impact, I'm going to do a quick review of what we've learned and elaborate on some stuff that we haven't covered. So obviously these servers and data farms are very resource costly to build and maintain. Somebody mentioned in the chat, mining precious metals like cobalt. Not only are they bad for the environment because we're literally ripping a hole in the ground and, dumping all this waste to do it, but there are a lot of ethical concerns in it. If anybody has heard about stuff going on in Congo with the cobalt mines to make batteries and all of that kind of stuff, that's a consideration. It's also, in my opinion, and many activists' opinions, another greenwashing tool, which we will discuss later. Greenwashing is basically lying about or misleading about the environmental impacts of something. And I will have a whole entire section on that. It also heavily contributes to e-waste because, again, there's not really great recycling for this type of stuff, and there's just so much equipment. Like think of all the e-waste that you make and multiply that probably by 1 million just per one data center because of all of these computers and all of the components they make and all of the maintenance that we need to do on them. They also cause pollution like noise and heat pollution, the fans and cooling mechanisms, the low-level constant buzzing. Some of my coworkers live around these data centers in Northern Virginia, and they're just like, yeah, it's just kind of like low-level buzzing all the time everywhere. You kind of get used to it. And I'm like, I think that would really drive me insane. But they also put off a lot of heat, which is another thing that affects some areas around my hometown because some places are building them on lakes and the lakes are apparently getting warmer. And then like we've been over, uses our precious drinkable water. So bringing this back to library science, I wanted to briefly discuss information literacy and misinformation in regards to the environmental impacts of AI. The environmental sector has a long history of information, so much so that it got its own term. So greenwashing is the act of making false or misleading statements about the environmental benefits of a product or practice. This can also be the over-exaggeration of benefits or bending the truth. So some notable examples are when Volkswagen misled environmental regulators about the environmental impact of their cars in the 2010s by like putting in those weird mechanisms that lied when they did their emission tests. And then another big one is when fossil fuel companies learned about the irreparable damage their products would cost the earth in the mid-20th century and then proceeded to lie about it, make propaganda about how good their stuff or how products were, how good fossil fuels were for the American economy, things like that. Under this same vein, AI is also being used for greenwashing, not in exactly the same way, but in similar ways. So we are going to do another activity in the chat. So what do you think of when you hear the word clean? So think of somebody saying like, this is clean, like a clean energy resource, a clean product. What are some words that come to mind when you think of the word clean? Pure without fault, environmentally friendly, chemical cleaners, unpolluted and unpolluting, green, wasteful byproducts, no residue, safe, healthy, doesn't contribute to emissions, natural, non-toxic, hopefully. Yes. So yeah, usually when you think of the word clean, if somebody says something is clean, you usually think like, it's good for you. It's like not going to harm you in any way. Again, non-toxic, natural, sustainable, all this stuff. Like Mel just said in the chat, it is a term that has no standing. It can be used without having it defined legally, which is something that fossil fuel companies love to exploit. Some examples in my everyday life that irritate me to no end are about clean burning natural gas. This is a decades-long campaign by gas companies to brand their products as clean, natural, renewable, and good for the environment. So, short answer, it's not. It's made of methane, which is a greenhouse gas, which contributes to global warming. If you ask one of these companies why it's clean, they'd probably say, well, it's better than coal or oil, which is pretty bad, but it's still not good though. It is still a fossil fuel that hurts the environment when burned. Naturally, you can see where I live because I literally circled my bus that I take like every day to work, powered by clean natural gas. Waste management, we can run on clean burning natural gas, renewable natural gas, clean energy. Again, none of these words are actually, there's no actual like federal definition for clean, so they just use it to like make it look like it's clean. But it is still a fossil fuel that hurts the environment when burned. Of course, they know this, but they want us to think it's clean and natural and good so that we won't question it. So, in a similar vein, similar examples have been popping up in the AI world, where they've been bending the truth, using misleading statements like artificial intelligence is saving the natural world. The Bitcoin one actually made me laugh because of how ridiculous it was. There is no environmental benefit to Bitcoin mining, and if there was, the costs far outweigh it. So a lot of these things like the mitigating climate change and preserving biodiversity, several ways AI can be used to help the environment. I would prefer that they said mitigating the effects of climate change, because they aren't really mitigating climate change. They're just kind of like dealing with the consequences. They're not doing anything for the root cause. Again, the AI is essential for solving the climate crisis. Again, like kind of a big speculation type thing, how AI could power the climate breakthrough, how AI could power the climate breakthrough the world needs. This is actually something similar to, which I will go over later, which is called techno-solutionism or techno-saviorism, where you believe that like some big technology is like gonna come around and just fix the environment. And they are really just over-exaggerating highly what AI can do for the environment, and also not considering the actual costs for it. So, in the last part of our presentation, we'll just be going over some responses to AIs and data centers' environmental impacts, various sectors that it impacts, various responses to it, what people think of it, and all that.
Okay. So as you can guess, with any technology, when it comes out, we try to legislate it, regulate it, put in policies in place for it. So here we're going to highlight some key examples of current global legislation aimed at regulating generative AI and addressing its environmental impact. These are current as of today's recording, but as we know, technology is always changing. So these are just a few examples that we found. So these examples really demonstrate the growing recognition of AI's potential effects on our environment and the need for comprehensive governance. So first we have the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act, and this landmark legislation was formally adopted in March 2024. It's the world's first comprehensive law governing AI. So it takes a risk-based approach. It categorizes AI applications based on their potential harm to society. The Act imposes strict regulations and requirements on high-risk AI systems, including those related to environmental impact. Next, we have the Artificial Intelligence Environmental Impact Act of 2024 in the United States. This legislation aims to assess and mitigate the environmental impact of AI systems, recognizing the significant energy consumption associated with training and deploying large AI models, like someone mentioned in the chat there. The HR 1460 Crypto Asset Environmental Transparency Act of 2023, which primarily focused on cryptocurrency, has implications for AI due to the similar infrastructure and the energy demands of both technologies, which we talked a little bit about before. This act could serve as a model for future legislation, specifically targeting AI's environmental impact. In Germany, the Energy Efficiency Act includes provisions specifically addressing energy-efficient AI systems in data centers. This demonstrates how some countries are integrating AI considerations into broader energy policies. China's AI guidance policy, enacted in July 2023, is known as the Interim Measures for the Management of Generative Artificial Intelligence Services, and focuses on regulating public-facing generative AI services, requiring security assessments, and emphasizing data quality and user protection. Brazil's AI guidance policy, introduced as Bill 2338/2023 in May 2023, proposes regulations on AI practices modeled after the EU legislation, but it has not been enacted into law yet. The bill aims to establish guidelines for the development and use on AI systems in Brazil, focusing on transparency, accountability, and ethical considerations. India's AI guidance, which was introduced in February 2024, this past spring through the Indian Artificial Intelligence and Data Stack Policy Framework, aims to create a robust AI ecosystem by promoting responsible AI development, addressing ethical concerns, and fostering innovation while ensuring data privacy and security. So as AI continues to advance, we can expect more targeted and refined regulations to emerge, balancing the innovation with, hopefully, fingers crossed, our environmental responsibility.
Moving on to recycling. Our society has a bit of a waste problem. We make a lot of trash and usually end up throwing it in landfills. My childhood house is right near a landfill, so I'm very familiar with it. Which is what happens to most of the e-waste in America. There are some companies that are recycling e-waste from data centers, but it's not a widespread phenomenon. And recycling this kind of stuff isn't easy because it's a lot of different components. A lot of it goes out of date, so it's not like you can just like, you know, take it out and put it into another computer. Recycling is also very low on the waste hierarchy, which you may know as reduce, reuse, recycle, the 3 R's. It would be best if data centers reduce their waste first by creating more efficient servers and facility designs like they're trying to regulate in countries all over the world. In the moment, or at this moment in the AI race, we're essentially building the staircase as we climb it and using a lot of resources in the process. However, since people haven't been reducing, some have turned to recycling. So data centers put off a lot of heat. Think of when your computer or your laptop starts working very hard, the fan starts buzzing rapidly, and the tower or the laptop bottom gets very hot. That happens basically inside of the entire data center. So it's very, very warm in there. That happens. Some have been reusing the heat to heat pools, homes, and other buildings, which can be tricky because you do have to have like some sort of like mechanism to reroute the heat to all of these different places. I saw this like prototype for like ideal data center like heat distribution, and it was like connecting like the data center to like houses and pools nearby and stuff like that, which I wouldn't want to live near a data center. But it seems to work in some way. Data centers and water providers have also been turning to reclaimed water and rainwater with varying results. I just went to I think it was a interstate coalition for the Potomac watershed. Potomac River Basin webinar where they talked specifically about the reclamation process in Loudoun County, which is in Northern Virginia, and how they are like reclaiming all this water in their facilities. It does take a lot of energy though. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of like desalination processes and facilities like that that are big in like California and coastal cities, but it just takes so much energy to have to like be able to make it up, bring this like polluted water up to drinking water standards again. Also, rainwater isn't as plentiful as it used to be just because we aren't getting a lot of rain and we are in drought conditions, so they're not really getting as much rainwater as they used to. So renewable energy, a lot of companies have been like trying to use renewable energy to power their data centers. So like Microsoft is investing in geothermal energy, which is where you build a big hole in the ground and take the heat that comes from it, which is really interesting. There's some solar farms being built to cater to Amazon data centers, some wind farms in Chile. The only bad thing that has to do with this is that some of these companies are also considering natural gas renewable because you can technically make methane renewable. But again, it's not great for the environment. It's a greenhouse gas. It still warms our planet. So not the best renewable resource. And then finally, a lot of protests. Some places with notable protests, Seneca Lake, which is near my hometown. They are actually very known for environmental protests because they also have a giant landfill where they get a lot of trash from New York City, but now they're getting a lot of Bitcoin mining operations there. So they're concerned about it warming the lake, the noise pollution, stuff like that. Northern Virginia, which me and Heidi have been talking about because we live around there, it's mostly land use and noise because, again, everyone wants to live in the DMV area, and we're running out of space and affordable housing to be able to do that. East London in the UK, the Netherlands, which I mentioned earlier, they are fighting with Microsoft over land use and nitrogen permits. In the Netherlands, they have this new program where you have to apply for a nitrogen permit because it is considered a pollutant over there, just because if you use too much of it, it's really bad for the environment. And Microsoft is getting these permits over farms, which obviously isn't great because we do need to make food to be able to eat. Chile, they are basically just fighting over all of the above. There's a lot of stuff going over in Chile. And then Dublin, Ireland protests are mostly about land use because they're building in northern Dublin, and Dublin's a very populated area. I really like this headline at the bottom: big tech's new headache, data center activism flourishes across the world. And then shout out to the New York people on the side here, because I believe that fracking is actually banned in New York, which is really great. But yeah, just some final thoughts to close out this presentation. We've always known how to stop climate change and global warming. I mean, it's just stopping burning fossil fuels and the overuse and exploitation of other damaging resources. We do need to change our behavior. We can't just like find a fix that'll just like there's no silver bullet for climate change. Like, we're not just gonna like suddenly make AI and it's gonna make everything better. So funnily enough, this falls under a concept called techno-solutionism, or techno-saviorism, as I like to call it, which describes our desire to jump on technological solutions as a quick and flawless way to solve complex real-world problems. So in the environmental sphere, this looks like continuing our destructive behaviors while saying that surely we'll find a technology that fixes everything, just so that we don't have to change our behaviors, the way that we consume products, the way that we deal with our resources, anything like that. Under this umbrella is also the very dangerous concept of geoengineering, which I won't get into, but basically it's just like doing random stuff to the environment to see if it'll make things better, but we really can't predict what the outcome will be. So I will acknowledge, while AI might be able to help in the meantime, it seems to me, as an environmentalist, to be another distraction from the real solution of stopping the burning of fossil fuels, anything like that. Yeah, some people are looking at it to be our savior rather than a technology with many consequences, and it definitely is a very like nuanced technology, and we need to consider all sides of the coin when we are thinking about using it. Again, it could be a decent tool against mitigating climate change effects, but at the moment people just seem to be like holding it up as like a savior for just like, oh yay, climate change is solved now. So not the best. But yes, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation. I'm an environmentalist through and through, so I'm very happy to talk about this stuff. And of course, Heidi got me into this. So we are very excited to be here. Give us any words to say before we take questions, Heidi?
Yeah, so thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. I know it's very overwhelming. It's complex, it's nuanced. We could have discussions all afternoon. The chat has been great. As always, we do have additional resources. So there are resources for everything we talked about today at the end of our slides, because we know fellow librarians will ask. So we have some there. If you are interested in additional sources, please reach out to Marissa and I. We are the two sides of this coin. She for the environmental side, me for more of the AI and technology side. But we're going to open it up for questions now. So please jump in the chat there.
Yeah, so thank you, Heidi and Marissa for your great presentation on this timely topic about the environmental impact of the AI. The committee has some questions to kickstart the Q&A session. So the first question is, who has influenced your thinking on this topic? And are there any resources or researchers you would recommend to someone looking to learn more about this topic?
I actually do have something because I was recently talking about this with one of my friends. I've been recently learning more about the degrowth movement, which is about like responsible use of resources and making sure that everyone in the world has the same access to resources, same level of quality of living, things like that. So it talks a lot about like intentional growing in some areas, intentional degrowth in other areas. So one of the big things that they talk about is technological waste and planned obsolescence. So these types of things, I believe the book is called Less is More, I believe, by Jason Hinkle. One of my friends just started reading it, so I'm very excited about it. But that is definitely one thing that has influenced my thinking on this, and sort of like how we are sort of just like blindly like continuing to like grow and put all these resources into AI and building it instead of, again, taking our time and sort of like, you know, considering, is this like the most important area that we need to be throwing all of our resources into right now? Are there more like beneficial areas that we could be putting it into? How does this impact our quality of life? Again, like people are losing like houses and farmlands over this. Like we should really be thinking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. Our next question is, given the broad scope of the software currently being described as AI, what are some basic features to look for which might indicate more or less environmental impact?
I think I'll try to take a stab at that. Can you unpack some more of that? Are you talking about like personal, like laptops people could look for that might have less environmental impact?
Yeah, something like the software, for example, we can probably talk about specific stuff about ChatGPT or like some of the backends, like how it gets like processed in the data center, for example. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very complicated question. I don't have any specific resources because I don't endorse any tools. People ask me all the time, as the computer science librarian, which generative AI do you use? Should I use ChatGPT? Should I use Perplexity? All of the tools and software come with their own drawbacks and limitations. And we just don't know yet which leader or which product we could say would be more environmentally friendly than others. One of the issues with data centers is they're so proprietary and they're so hidden because we don't regulate them. They're not required to tell us how much water they're using, how much electricity they're using. So consumers can't make that decision for themselves yet. When it comes to software or tools right now, what I'm encouraging everyone to do right now is to consider biases and privacy concerns, which are much more at the forefront. We're discovering every day the biases we know that come from the large language models. Privacy issues are coming to light with the different tools. So that's really where I'm focusing, and I don't really have a specific software that I can say is better than any others from an environmental aspect.
Thank you. I wanted to pull out that there's a follow-up question in the chat, which is Cirrus, I believe, asking, is a task-specific AI, e.g. scribe how, equally damaging as the more generic LLMs?
Sorry, I was reading the question so I could understand. I don't know that we have that information at this time. Again, everything is so proprietary. that we have to be able to measure something first in order to be able to tell how damaging it is. From my perspective, this is me. I don't think one person using ChatGPT at their desk as a librarian to write a lesson plan is going to break the bank, right? It's going to be these huge data centers that are taking it up. It's these huge oil companies that are ruining the environment. So I don't think your one software that you use for accessibility or your one software that you use for generating lesson plans or helping with a research question is going to tip the scales.
Thank you. I also have another question from the chat I would like to highlight, which was asked at 22 after by Madeline, which is what % of data centers are used for AI as opposed to other computing, and how fast are these data centers growing due to AI?
So again, we don't know. And this is part of the big push for accountability, transparency, regulation. When someone like Amazon comes into Northern Virginia and buys up 100 acres, kills a forest, puts up a warehouse and puts a security fence around it, we don't know if that's for data mining. We don't know if that's for artificial intelligence. We don't know if it's for Bitcoin. We don't know what's going on in there, which again is part of the troubling conversation. So that's something that we hope comes to light as more legislation is enacted and we're holding those companies accountable.
Yeah, I'd also like to give a shout out to Ed Markey, who is the one that's basically proposing like every AI/data center, like environmental regulation and like the entire country, which I found out the other day. I actually got to like meet him at a gala, which was like crazy. But yeah, he's like the guy doing it all, which is so fun.
Yeah, so Kira, do you want to like share other questions from the chat, or we can continue with the common discussions?
Yeah, I think most of the other questions in the chat have gotten a great reply from our presenters in the chat. So I think we can go back to committee questions for now, though if someone wants to send me a message if they want their question answered out loud as well, I can read it out.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, so our committee's next question is what sort of impact might government regulation have on the AI's environmental impact or mitigation of the climate change?
So I was actually just thinking about this while driving my sister's car, which is kind of funny. But think of just like the evolution of cars themselves. Like they used to be death traps to drive in. Like you would get in an accident and that would just like kill you and the car would be fine. But nowadays we have so many regulations, so many like safety protocols, all of that stuff, so that when you do get in a car accident, that will actually, the car is meant to brake in a way that will save you and like minimize the damage to you yourself. So this is something that we have been able to do in other industries, been able to like do all these regulations, things like that. Another good example is the ozone layer. Everyone's probably heard of the ozone layer hole. I believe there was a climate agreement in like the 2000s or 90s where they basically were just like, we're going to stop using any chemical that depletes the ozone layer. And since then, it's been slowly healing. I believe they said that by like 2060, it's going to be back to levels, not seeing like levels of like healedness, like replenishment in a way, not seen since like the mid 1900s. So there are all of these like examples of regulation working and prioritizing like the environment and humans. The big thing here is just that tech companies have a lot of power and a lot of money, and a lot of lobbyists. So they really don't want their growth to be hindered in any way, and they're going to put a lot of effort into that. So if we can't get the regulation, it would probably be great. It would work fine. It would be awesome. But we do have a large hurdle of all of these powerful companies.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that, because the question that I got as the computer science person a lot was, well, this new artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence has been around since the 1950s. This is not new for computer science folks. But we didn't have government regulation, like a true government regulation on software until 1980. So if you think about how long it takes us to get through the process to enact a bill, a law, all these protections, I'm actually quite excited that they brought it forward in the US and in other places so quickly, because we were all on it for a really long time. And then, you know, it wasn't of interest. And then suddenly ChatGPT came out and it was in the headlines and people were being called to DC. It was probably more exciting for us here in the DC area than other people in the country. But, you know, but then, as Marissa said, companies shored up. They got a lot of money. Things are grinding to a halt. I mean, even today, the Supreme Court is ruling on social media, which is another technology. So we need it, but I think it's going to move at a very glacial pace compared to, if we look back in history and compare it to that timeline.
Great, thank you. So probably our next question is actually related to the librarianship, and also probably you also mentioned in your presentation about how this environmental impact of AI might relate to the information literacy. So our next question is how to effectively integrate AI environmental sustainability into the library information literacy instruction.
So I can take that one. Again, sort of my feedback. We turned to ACRL when ChatGPT came out, hoping for guidelines right away, right? Like we all went a semester or two and went, where's the framework for this? Are librarians going to teach it? Are other people going to teach it? How are we going to teach these skills? And we're now starting to see some great AI literacy frameworks that are coming out. There was a new one out of MIT. We are seeing one from ACRL about library workers and the proficiencies we should have with AI, run by Leo Lowe. So I think that environmental sustainability, for now, in the current times, you could work it into part of your conversation about you know, responsible use of information. Where does that information come from when you get it from ChatGPT? Much like electricity doesn't just appear out of the socket when you charge your laptop, where is it coming from? So for now, people could work at it in that conversation. I think eventually that should be a part of the curriculum when we get to that scaffolding and that framework, hopefully from ACRL or other folks. Just like we talk about where does information come from and biases, where is all this data coming from? Who's housing it? Where are the biases? And what are the environmental impacts should be part of that conversation.
Great, yeah, thank you. So we have the last questions before we wrap up this session. So it's also related to the librarians. So what are some take-home lessons or actions that librarians can take to support sustainable AI from your session? And are there any examples we can draw from with other recent revolutionary technologies?
I'll take the technologies one if Marissa wants to think about some take-home lessons. So one of the examples I give folks is I would put this paradigm shift right up there with Wikipedia and iPhones. Both of those technologies really catapulted higher education forward. They catapulted society forward. Wikipedia was horrible, bad. We taught folks not to use it, but it came around. It evolved. Same with iPhones. They're a distraction. They're terrible, but now every single person has one. So I think we can look at conversations from those two technologies. If you want to explain to your patrons, how this might be changing, how it's going to affect society on so many different levels and people of all backgrounds, those are two technologies that really come to my mind.
The only thing I can think about for take-home lessons or actions that librarians can take to support sustainable AI would be, again, supporting regulations like the ones that Ed Markey is proposing, and also just like what's the word? Supporting renewable energy sources. I mean, even like electric cars can technically be like dirty sources, depending where they get their electricity from. If you have an electric car and it's powered by coal, probably not great. But like in my hometown, we have all of our energy is powered by Niagara Falls. So when I charge my electric car here, renewable energy, great electric car. But yeah, it's definitely, they keep things so locked down and so secretive and such a black box that it's hard to be able to like, again, know which data center your like question to ChatGPT is going to or anything like that. The only thing that I can think of is like systematic fixes, like supporting renewable energy and regulations and anything like that. I know that there is a sustainability roundtable through ALA. I'm unsure if they've started talking about the sustainability, or sustainable AI or anything like that. But that would probably be a great place to check out. And then just like keep an eye on what's happening. Stay informed, look out for greenwashing, learn what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you again, Marissa and Heidi, for your great presentation today. So lastly, I think we have a survey link that is Clara already posted on the meeting chat. So the committee members would be appreciated if the attendees could take a few minutes to fill out the surveys to let us know how the webinar goes. So so thank you everyone again for attending today's webinar. Clara, do you have anything to add?
Just want to thank both presenter Marissa and also Dr. Brentford. Yes.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Nova Native, iconic.